Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is the Concord Public Works Commission meeting. And in accordance with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, we are conducting this meeting virtually. The Public Works Commission is conducting this meeting on January 12th, 2022, starting at 4:00 p.m. And we're using a Zoom platform in accordance with the town's policy directive and guidelines issued on April 1st of 2020 and amended on May 7th. I ask that all public work commissioners, town staff, and presenters activate their video and mute their microphone unless they have something to say or are participating in committee dialogue. For members of the public, when I open the meeting to public comment, in order to be recognized, please use the raise your hand option in Zoom, or if you're on phone, hit *9, or if you're on video, wave your hands. We'll get to you one way or the other. So at this point, I'd like to call the meeting to order. I, Jeff Vassar, hereby call this meeting to order. All commission votes will be taken via roll call. And we will start with attendance roll call of commissioners. When I announce your name, please reply that you are present. So Dave DeLong. I don't think he has joined us yet. Andrea Solomon.
Here.
James Terry.
Present.
Casey Winslow. Casey was here at one point.
She's present.
Here.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Jeff Vassar present. I also should note, and I think everybody noticed, that this meeting is being recorded and will be available for later viewing on the town's website. And anybody from the public, if you do ask to speak, when you start speaking, please give your name and address for the record. So our first item of business will be review and approval of meeting minutes. Everybody was provided the meeting minutes from our December 8th meeting. And I'm wondering if any of the commission members have any comments. Or if anybody would like to make a motion to approve.
So move.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Thank you. And again, any comments?
Oh, I think they were really well done.
We're very comprehensive, yes. So hearing no comments, so by roll call, ask for motion, approval of the motion. Again, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. It doesn't look, I don't know if David is on yet, so I'm going to ask his name again. I don't see his name. Andrea Solomon.
I don't see him yet.
Andrea.
I approve.
James Terry.
Aye.
Casey Winslow.
Aye.
Jeff Vassar. Aye. So now we're going to turn it over to Alan, talk about our calendar and what do we have for upcoming meetings.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. The really only kind of significant change that you may have noted is that we are postponing the solid waste recycling rate hearing. Generally, it's something we do in the February timetable. We've had sort of a lot of transition inside Public Works. We've been kind of moving personnel around to cover some vacancies. And in fact, we're also identifying some needs that might take a little bit more time for us to vet so we can bring a more complete packet to the commission. We are seeing just a lot of activity where we want to make sure we're covering, the needs and interests of the community, but making sure we're offsetting for various costs that we've seen they're coming, into the fold. One point of issue that we're really struggling with is the cardboard collection over at Kai's Road. So we're going to be evaluating that and kind of seeing if there's some alternative approaches, but we're sort of our site is becoming a little bit more of a transfer site rather than office operation site. So we're going to be grappling with that a little bit, but that's the only notable change at this point. That's anticipated in June.
Hey, thank you, Alan. Before we move on to the next item, I would like to note that David DeLong has joined the meeting as one of our commission members.
Sorry.
So no problem. We have a lot to talk about this afternoon and early evening. So we're going to move right along to the roads program review. I know we've talked about certain pieces of this over our last couple of meetings, but now I think we have a more comprehensive picture and recommendations from the staff. So then I'll turn it back to you, Alan, and your staff.
Great. In fact, I just want to call attention. We have quite an audience. This is wonderful. So welcome those who haven't been to Public Works Commission meetings before. Our interest today is to bring the commission up to speed on some refinement that we're involved with the roads program. But I also know that when we talked about this meeting, there was also interest in a general discussion about the capital budget. So what I want to do is sort of tee up this conversation. It's less of a formal presentation, more of a conversation with the commission, but wanted to use what I had presented for the town meeting preview this weekend. I think it's a good starting point. It talks about the capital budget focused primarily in the right-of-way area, but it's some big numbers. We want to start there, and I will share the screen and bring the, let's see, it's kind of interesting. I'm now going between Microsoft Teams and Zoom, so I have to kind of go, hope I'm in the right format. Does everybody see the table at this point? Okay, great. So we presented over the weekend, and this is a summary of the capital plan that we shared with the commission previously. But in this particular format, it's the 5-year plan, which deals with, as you see, it's a comprehensive right-of-way strategy. And oftentimes in the past, there's been some confusion, misunderstanding as far as what a roads program is versus a comprehensive right-of-way program. Roads are often the obvious things that we see. It's the condition of the pavement, and that's what everybody pays attention to and draws a lot of attention. You'll look, we have broken up in accordance with the guidance from the FinCom, our various assets and needs over the 5-year period. And we talk about the smaller capital improvements where you see the tier 1 pay go, that's asset management tools, road safety, striping, signage, traffic signals. It's small, but not real small. If you look at it, over a 5-year period, it's $1 million of investment. So it's real money. But when you get to the tier 2, you're talking about much more significant programs that may require debt. They certainly need to be incorporated into larger capital improvements town-wide. And you'll see items like the culvert and bridge repairs, parking lot rehab, pavement management. That's the big one. If you look at the value, we're looking over $3 to $4 million a year, up to 20 over 5-year period. That's for the road, the condition of the roads that we drive on. Pedestrian bike improvements, another allowance that's going to do things that may be tangential to the pavement. Stormwater improvements are very important. Traffic improvements and signals. There's real money involved, and Steve Dukran is, town engineer. He's here to help us understand these numbers. They're sort of an order of magnitude. They are conceptual planning level, but they're based on our professional experience and judgment as far as what the town's needs are. When we go to the roads, we talk about over 108 miles of public roadways that we're responsible for maintaining, repairing, and replacing, depending on the needs. There are 25 miles of private roads we've talked about in the past. There's also some needs there. We don't have a solution, but we want to make sure that's on our radar, or at least an approach for the private ways eventually. We look at the level of investment we've had over the last few years, and it's not inconsistent with the roads program over the past 10 years. But for example, in FY 21 and 22, a combination of Chapter 90, those are the state funds that come to Concord, as well as the tax support, which is 1.25, we're looking at somewhere around $2 million a year that we've invested into our roads program. You're looking at our ask is significantly more, or what we're identifying as needs, closer to $3.5 million. When you look at this $2 million, I'm going to scroll back up to this table. That's generally close to the allowance we've had, where if we think we needed 6 for all of these things, we've had to squeeze all of the ask and needs into the roads program. So that's why we think it's important for the town to understand the difference between a culvert, a sidewalk, traffic mitigation or management versus simply paving or restoring the road. New sidewalks, for instance. So it's a significant delta between what we believe the needs are, the level of investment we've had. What's important is this particular figure here shows this is something everybody will get more and more comfortable with over time, but basically the condition of a road is generally determined once it's a new road will get installed. There'll be a structural component to it, a base, a top to it, and that road has an expected life cycle of about 25 years. If you just leave the road to weather conditions and traffic, it's going to wear and it's going to deteriorate. And if you allow it with no maintenance or improvements, it'll follow this trend of going from an excellent condition, 5 years into 10, you start getting into a good condition, and you go out 15 years, and between 10 and 20 years, you can see a precipitous drop in the condition of the road. It goes from a fair to poor to very poor condition pretty quickly. And this is what people see. This is what their eyes and tires tell them, or skateboards or whatever. The goal is to maintain an average condition town-wide of somewhere in the good to excellent range. Presently, with our lack of investment, what we've seen since 2018 to present is we're on this part of the curve where the condition of the roads on average town-wide are starting to drop off in this end of the curve. And without maintenance or restoration, they'll get even worse. And so the experience that the public has is basically on the condition of the road. And if we let it deteriorate, we can live with that. But for restoration, it's a bad experience for everybody involved. Public Works gets complaint calls. We have increased maintenance costs. We have unsatisfied residents. And it's really not the ideal approach. So the goal is to do investment in our assets. This is specifically on the road, not for all those other items I talked about, but this is the focus we look at. When we look at a road, if we're in this area of rehabilitation, it means the road is really in need of a significant investment. And you can see the cost per square yard of investment goes up. This is when we're talking about replacing the road. And at that point, we'll generally look at other utilities. Is there anything that we need to invest in underground before we do this replacement? Is there any ancillary needs? But potentially we'll look at sidewalks and things like that too. But rehab is expensive and the dollar doesn't go very far. And it's limited as far as the amount of roads we can actually address. Preservation is much less expensive. By using preservation techniques, you can restore the road so the experience to the residents and businesses are positive, but it may be something that needs to happen more frequently within the 5 to 15 year range versus the 15 to 25 year range. Rehabilitation allows for improvements for drainage, some changes in intersections, adding sidewalks, crosswalks, all those things are, generally get to the point we're in a rehab. And we also have to add to the costs the underground utility, which we didn't identify above. And for instance, water or sewer, you're looking at $200, $300 a foot for replacement of that infrastructure that you'd have to add on to, the cost, to the community. So that's under a rehab. Under the road preservation strategy, what you see is every 5 years or so, there's different treatment techniques that are fairly low cost that would keep the condition of the road in very good condition on average townwide. And you can see some modest treatments that are being proposed as far as the nature of the treatment and the duration of the life cycle of that treatment. But you're not necessarily replacing the road. You're dealing with the, more of the top, kind of a superficial side of that. So that's the overview of the roads program, or the comprehensive right-of-way. I presented this, to town meeting, for the preparation on Saturday. And I now wanted to use this as the opportunity to just have the conversation with the Public Works Commission and, excuse me, drill into what is it that we're doing and kind of next step. So.
Thank you, Alan. Sorry, had to unmute myself. I'm going to open it up for any questions, comments from commissioners first, and then we'll go to the public. Jim.
Yes, I know at the meeting that was last night, Stefan had described a couple of the preservation techniques as microsurfacing and asphalt rubber. And I know that those are new techniques that we're going to be using for the first time. In the memo that we got last month, there were, I think, like 6 or 7 different preservation techniques. And the question I have is, are we going to be using some of the other ones in future years?
Great. I'm going to now introduce Steve Dukran. Steve is here, and he'll start kind of walking through the details and kind of the explanation. Steve, you there?
Yes, I'm here. Steve Dukran, town engineer. And I know Stefan is on the meeting as well. Yes, an option of pursuing several preservation treatments. We chose these two, the asphalt rubber and microsurfacing, because these are the ones that are most popular, but is used by the surrounding communities. They have had good results for those. So we want to try those out in this town first and make sure that we are able to manage those kinds of projects better, as well as to see how the neighborhoods and the abutters of the streets react to having these treatments applied on their streets. In the future years, we look at the other methods as well. But we want to make sure we don't just jump into it and start using these things without knowing how the results will affect us.
So building off of that, Stephen, I know in the presentation yesterday, there was a discussion about how this application would be used on some roadways this year, I believe. About, if I'm correct in that, about how many miles of roadways would we be using this new technique on?
I have to look up the number, but I believe just about 3 miles, 3+ miles.
Okay.
The preservation.
So, relatively small amount. And
Yes.
will we be able, do you think we'll be able to get a good feel for how that's performing by this time next year when we're thinking about the next batch of roadways, or do you really need to see how it plays out over like a 5-year period?
So in terms of the longevity, I think we can learn from the experience from neighboring communities that you can get 7 to 10 years of,
Okay.
for instance, the asphalt rubber. The trial for the first year is mostly to make sure that we are applying it properly, we are managing it properly, and we are also residents evaluate how it's impacting them. For instance, in putting down the asphalt rubber, all these the chips will be put in place, and there'll be some cleanup that needs to be done. As well as the surface is going to be rough. The first winter, we expect that the surface to be smoothed out and it'll look pretty much like a typical road. We want to do that, and we just need to winter to evaluate that.
Okay.
The overall longevity of it, you really, we don't want to wait for 7 years to say, okay, it's performing well. I think there's evidence out there that these methods they do work well.
Thank you. Yes,
Is it,
Casey?
Steve, is it more disruptive or does it take longer to cure or anything like that that the public would want to know about?
Most of these methods, you can drive it on the application the same day. I've have experience with microsurfacing before, and you have to keep the cars off of microsurfacing for maybe 2 hours or so. And I am not familiar with the asphalt rubber except what we've learned from the other communities, but I believe you can be driving on it within the same day, after a few hours.
I see.
Yes.
And I know we had gone over the cost previously at a previous meeting. I mean, to like the layperson looking on, they're going to think, wow, there's a big jump. And the second half of the chart there. So, but it's because we're doing more streets, correct? And we're having to be more proactive in preservation, correct?
All right. So let me answer why we have that big jump. So they did 2 changes to what we want to do to the program going forward. First, we want to make sure that the investment is the right amount to get our average pavement condition index to a level, and Alan mentioned, good to excellent. Right now is poor to fair. It's on the wrong, it's going in the wrong direction. So you need a much larger investment in the road system to get it up there. The second issue, the second item in the new approach is to have preservation to preserve what's good, but we still have to invest in what's bad. So that's where the big cost is, in what's bad and what's getting bad. And we can't just spend all the money on preservation. Some towns like Lexington, they're about a 50-50 split on preservation and rehab. And there are a lot of roads in poor condition out there, and you got to get to them. And that's where the money is. So, and what's affecting costs? Now, our costs are based on, what's actually happening in construction these days. Asphalt is going up, labor is going up, fuel is going up. And we have been guided to put real numbers for inflation. We are looking, according to the industry, about an 8% increase from last year into this year for construction. We yet to see that realized. After we put the bids out, we'll see how the bids come in. But we have also been told that this is not going to be under control in any time soon. So that factors in there in our cost estimating. So that's why you see a significant jump, about 80% increase over what we've been doing just in pavement management.
Thank you. David?
Thank you. I have no question about the technical competence of the DPW and Steve and Alan and whatever you say in terms of the technology, but I'm the slow learner when it comes to budgets and finances. And I'll ask the questions that have maybe already been answered, but I need to hear them again. So what's the increased price tag for the town year by year over what we've been spending? I'm just trying to put myself in the shoes of the average taxpayer who's going to show up at the town meeting or who's going to have to vote on this, assuming this is going to be voted on, correct?
That's right.
At town meeting, please.
Correct.
Go ahead.
And I think, Dave, is the screen showing the capital improvement plan?
Fine.
Okay. Very important to understand. And again, I have to be clear because I've seen from my experience, short experience as director, that we provide a recommended budget. And historically, it has to fit within and it needs to, the guidance of the FinCom and town manager, and they're responsible for all of the needs of the town.
Right.
And there's only so much money to be, kind of shared. But what we found is if we were asking for 2 million, we might get 1.25 million, and it would be supplemented with a Chapter 90 funds from the state. Well, that's okay. But what I've really found, and we were sort of working, with the town manager's office over the last couple of years, is the real needs are all of the above. And when we talk roads, people immediately think of pavement. And when they're funding it, they think we're funding everything. And we're sort of torn where we get less money than what we think is necessary to maintain the condition of the road. That's what people see. But then we have additional costs and expenses that come our way that we need to prepare for. So what we've done with this budget, and this is in accordance with the FinCom and a recommendation of the Select Board, to do a 5-year capital plan that identifies the needs. And so for the right-of-way, all of these various components and assets are part of the right-of-way. And I'm familiar with the experience for water and wastewater for years. People don't see it. It's out of sight, out of mind.
Yep.
But it's very expensive. What they don't see is the stormwater needs and improvements. What they don't understand is the culverts that are sort of failing, like we had on Monument Street. What they don't understand is striping and signage may be tens of thousands of dollars, but reconstructing a crosswalk with flashing beacons and all sorts of, design and site work that needs to be done can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, like we just experienced on Sudbury Road, where it was $160,000, but the estimate was 20.
Wow.
So what we want to make sure is we're giving real numbers. And if we back off, we routinely get special requests from everybody cares most about what's in their front yard, what they see and drive, and their crosswalk. And they're all equally important. And what we get is challenged with, well, we just need a crosswalk here. And they think it's the cost of the paint. It's not the cost of the paint. There's a lot of other things that come in. So we're identifying what we believe are the real costs for each of the assets. And they've been broken up this way so we can define them, understand them. And yes, these are order of magnitude costs. But when you look at all of these for the right-of-way, it's $34 million over 5 years. And what we historically have had is somewhere in the order of $2 million a year. And what happens is infrastructure deteriorates. And everybody sees the road, or they're upset because a sidewalk isn't extended or installed, or a traffic signal isn't realigned. But that's all, those are needs. And we agree that some of these things need to be done. We just can only do what is funded.
Yeah, I'm not at all questioning that. I'm just trying to, again, understand the numbers that taxpayers are going to be confronted with, the jump that they're going to see, and be ready with an explanation of what are the costs. And Steve, I sort of assume you've done this. What are the costs of not pursuing this program? What happens to us down the road? What are we really going to have to pay to rebuild these roads? Do you have some model around that? So you can say that you can show the trade-offs of spending the money today or in the next 5 years versus in the next 15 years or 20 years?
So we don't have a model of all of the infrastructure items that Alan showed, but we do model the pavement management part. And it's a model that's pretty common for many towns. And it shows that if you continue to spend just the same amount per year, your pavement condition is just doesn't keep going down. And if everything gets to that point of failure, the numbers that we showed before, it costs probably 5 times per mile to repair, as to as if you were ignoring all of letting the good roads fall into disrepair. And so when you have that kind of huge cost, it's going to be, I don't have a number, but today, if you were to rehab everything and bring it up to an excellent level just today, that number is probably around $25–30 million. If you wait for 5 years and you want to do the same thing, it's going to probably be double that. We call that backlog, a backlog calculation, yeah.
Right. Thank you. One last question for Alan or maybe Steve is, do you have comparative budgets for neighboring towns? Can you point to other towns that are spending similar amounts of money or what they're spending for this kind of work, this kind of capital program?
Yes. So we spoke with the town of Lexington, and they have been doing the mix of preservation and then traditional rehab techniques for many years now, 6–7 years, I believe. And they're at a point where their pavement condition index is in the 80s, as opposed to ours being in the 60s. And their annual budget today is over $3 million for just the pavement management.
Right. And how does that compare to ours? Or how will that, what's the point of that number?
So $3 million is twice of what we are doing today. We're doing 1.5, they're doing $3 million.
I don't know how that compares to roads, you know, the miles of roads.
Oh, miles of roads. They okay, yeah, I get a question. It's a similar number of miles.
Okay,
Yes.
Thank you, Stephen.
thank you.
Jim, did you have your hand up at one point?
Yeah, I wanted to make a comment that I want to applaud the engineering people, Stephen and Stefan, because they have gone and done the work on the proposed roads much earlier than we have in the past. We're going to be able to get the bids out much earlier in the process, and that we will have a greater opportunity for competition, if you will, in the bidding process. So I think that the fact that we are now moving our program earlier in the calendar and fiscal year is going to provide us great benefits because we're going to be knowing exactly what we're going to do, and we'll have our bids out when the other communities are also putting theirs out. And so we'll be in a much better position. The fact that we are now trying preservation techniques is going to make more of the contractors want to have the technology to be able to also provide that service because they're going to see that communities like Concord are moving in that direction, and they want to maintain the business that they've had in the past.
Thank you. Before we open it to the public, the other thing I think we all appreciate is how granular you've gotten with the estimates, as opposed to a couple large numbers, as you described very well. You've now broken it down: roads, sidewalks, lights, etc. So it's a much more understandable to us, and I think it's much more understandable to the public, that they understand where their dollars are going to. And it is a big jump, but I also think that's the result of proactive planning and thinking ahead about what's going to be the best value for the community in the long run. And that is to be a little higher over the next few years, with the understanding that means it's going to be not quite so high down the road, no pun intended. If nothing else from the commission members, I will ask if the public has any questions or comments, and I'm going to ask Anna for her help. Robert, did you? Yes, go ahead.
Robert Hilsinger, 102 Central Street. I did sit in yesterday and I was curious. Well, first of all, it was an excellent presentation. Both Stevens did a superb job in explaining the information, and there were some difficult questions for the staff people to answer. But I was curious what number they had attending yesterday.
I believe it was somewhere 25 to 30, I believe was the count. And just to explain what we did for those who weren't in attendance or weren't aware of it. And it's also important as far as our budget. The engineering division has designed a program to fit the existing FY22 budget. So let's be very clear. So the locations of the roads and the types of repair, replacement are already funded. And so that's why they can proceed with completion design and bid. The increase that we're proposing is future years. So let's just be clear. We're working off of FY22 plan, and it doesn't allow for a lot of other niceties, but it can restore the pavement in these particular areas. So that's important to understand for the group. Because we've identified with the Public Works Commission through a pretty process, this is the third discussion on roads. We talked about the new approach, the preservation techniques, and last meeting we talked about those roads that have been prioritized based on science. And I think we're using the PCI as a tool to help dictate both what roads are prioritized and the nature of treatment. And we used that, and we sort of presented that discussion to the commission. And then the next step in the process is we reach out to abutters. And historically, that would have been a meeting where people would be invited through a letter. They'd come to Public Works campus. They'd be able to talk with staff, and they'd get some information so they'd understand what's going to be the impact, to them. Given where we are now with, sort of Zoom meetings and the challenges with COVID, we opted for a Zoom meeting instead. So all abutters of the roads were contacted, were sent notice, and then we put a news and notice out for the general public so they could listen if they were interested. So it's the approach we take, which is how to identify the roads and then how to make sure abutters and impacted residents are aware of the work and can ask questions as far as, the specifics of construction, or maybe even their apron, how does it affect their driveway, for instance. So that was what we did last night. And so tonight is more of just because this is broader interest on, budget and capital planning and some of the new approach, this is more of the conversation. So I don't want to, that sort of sets the table as far as tonight. And, it's interesting, we have more people in attendance. I think it might be something to do with the scenic roads bylaw. I'm not sure, but I know I see some names out there are probably interested, but the roads affect everybody. So these questions are helpful, not just the commission, but to the general public. So that's.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you could please use the raise hand feature in Zoom, that would be preferable. Thank you.
Any other?
Anna, you'll sort of call people out, or shall I?
Yes, I will.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't see anybody, so if either of
I
you
see
do,
Mary
please.
Hartman has got her hand up.
Okay,
I do. Thank you. My name is Mary Hartman. I live at 16 Concord Green. I'm a member of the Finance Committee, but I'm speaking for myself. I have a question about the $450,000 placeholder you have for signals. And I'm wondering, is that replacing signals, or is that installing new signals across town, new traffic lights?
Steve Dukan, the answer is we have a couple of signals that are in need of replacement and upgrade. The one at the intersection of Baker, Main, and Cottage, that is approaching the end of life, and that will have to be replaced in its entire structure. The one on Fitchburg Turnpike and Sudbury Road, that has some obsolete components, and that would be those will have to be upgraded as well. So that's primarily what that 150,000 scheduled for the year fiscal year 24 is for.
Great. The Baker Ave is my neighborhood, so thank you very much.
Yes.
Does anyone else have any inquiries? If they could kindly raise their hand.
Don't see any, Anna. I think we're probably,
Okay.
Jeff, good to go to the next
Yep.
item. There,
Thank you, everybody, for your comments and questions. And now I'll, let Alan move on to the next item regarding draft articles for upcoming town meeting.
so sort of looking through my packet, and I know there was, I'm not sure if I misplaced it or if it wasn't the packet. We had presented the Public Works with, we have standing what we call those articles that are generally in the consent calendar. Nothing remarkable other than more administrative in function, but for the enterprise funds, in essence, providing an allowance to spend money that has been received through user fees or special service fees towards these enterprise accounts. That would be the water fund, the sewer fund. There's a sewer improvement fund. That's where we collect fees for new capacity, and solid waste recycling. Those are sort of standing annual articles that are more administrative in nature. There's no significant borrowing requests this town meeting, for any of the enterprise accounts. If there were, that would be a separate article. Nothing presented this year. We will likely, be, we're vetting the capital projects and debt requests through the meeting we had at the preview on Saturday, and there'll probably be more conversations about that, and we'll be sharing that information, but that'll be part of the town budget under its, an article. But otherwise, the only thing that's really remarkable or potentially interesting to the commission is something that relates to the scenic roads. There's a draft scenic roads bylaw that Public Works, should be aware of. Historically, there's been conversations about the need for this bylaw. There's enabling legislation that allows communities to designate certain roads for certain controls. And I think we have Elizabeth Hughes from planning, who is going to give an overview. I provided in your packet some background information, and I think we do need to have a bit of a conversation because there's questions as far as what it does, some of the authority issues, how that relates to authority of the Public Works Commission. And there's a little bit of a challenge where we're still, with our new team, at least in the last couple of years, we're still learning the process and those areas that we have authority and how that needs to be managed and exercised, as well as relatively new members on the commission. So I think this is a good opportunity to understand this process a little bit about, how we go about, making repairs, improvements to the right of way, and how that sort of relates to this particular bylaw. So that's to set the table. Elizabeth, are you ready to sort of talk? Right.
Yep. So Anna, if I can share my screen.
The screen is being shared.
Okay. So I'm never, so I have two monitors at home, so I'm never quite sure which. Are you just seeing the single slide?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So I want to say thank you for inviting me to just come to the Public Works Commission meeting. I'm just going to give a basic overview of the scenic roads bylaw and the mechanisms, and then Melissa Sellfield, who is the chair of the Historical Commission, will follow me up with just a couple of statements. So as Alan said, the Scenic Roads Act was adopted in 1973. And within that language, Historical Commission, Natural Resources Commission, or a planning board can put forth a warrant article for scenic roads bylaw that does need approval by town meeting. It is a general bylaw. It is not a zoning bylaw. Within that actual warrant article and the bylaw, the roads that are to be designated as a scenic road have to be listed in that bylaw. And the state enabling legislation does allow the town to assess fines for non-compliance. So that is also an aspect of the warrant article, because to enable the town to assess fines, we need to also amend our non-criminal disposition bylaw. So the basic context of the Scenic Roads Act is that any repair, maintenance, reconstruction, or paving work that requires cutting or removal of trees or the tearing down or destruction of stone walls or portions require a public hearing from the planning board. That is it. We're talking about cutting and removal of trees and tearing down and destruction of stone walls. Those are the only two things that trigger a scenic roads public hearing. The enabling legislation does recognize that there's also a tree warden, and what the enabling legislation does is it says that towns can consolidate the hearing with the planning board if there's also a hearing required by the tree warden. Concord has a long history of discussing, scenic roads, starting back in 1987 with the town's land use plan. Then again in 1995 and 2001, the historic master plan, which is the historical commission, also had a recommendation to evaluate a scenic roads bylaw. Then there's the 2005 comprehensive long range plan, which had different recommendations and goals dealing with adopting an official roads policy that dealt with the historic and environmental sensitivity within that policy. Also action items and goals dealing with the implementing items for the protection of the historical and cultural vistas, farmlands, scenic roadways, stone walls, major trees, and village centers. So that kind of hits on everything with that goal. And then we have the Envision Concord Plan Bridge to 2030, which also contains different recommendations and action items to, again, address the character and cultural resources of our roadways, looking at the scenic roads as critical issues, and looking at the 1994 roads policy to look at defining those features of what is a historical landscape. Currently, there's 9 public roads that are being proposed to be included in the warrant. And the warrant is not proposing to include any private roadways. I have had information from town council that although the state enabling legislation is somewhat silent on the matter, it doesn't specifically call out public or private. There are definitely legal issues and that deal with any type of bylaw that the town would try to implement and on private roadways. So I want to make it clear that it is these 9 roads that are being proposed. I have created for the Historical Commission, they now have a dedicated scenic roads bylaw webpage that has interactive map that the town's GIS analyst Jill Moonheron put together, where you can click on that interactive map and you can zoom in and see any parcel that would be impacted that has frontage on one of these 9 roads. There's also a link to the, I think it's 1852 map, which is one of the guiding documents that the commission and its group of researchers are using. And also for all 9 of these roads, there have been different historic researchers in town who have done extensive historic research, and those research documents are also posted on that webpage. Some of the things that town staff has discussed and raised concerns dealing with town projects. And again, want to say that we're talking about only repair, reconstruction, or paving projects that require the removal of trees or destroy or remove a stone wall apply. So your general paving of a roadway does not apply. There was concern raised about just the annual maintenance, whether it's Public Works, or I raised the same concern for CMLP. Both have annual maintenance programs for the cutting of trees, whether it's for safety, sight lines, or utility lines. After speaking with town council, there's definitely the ability to put in that type of exemption, whether it's in the bylaw or whether it's part of the rules and regulations that would be developed and adopted for the planning board should this bylaw pass. I also want to make it clear that it is actually specifically stated in the state legislation that if a road is designated as a scenic road, it has no impact or effect on the town receiving any Chapter 90 funds. I mentioned rules and regulations. Rules and regulations for the scenic roads bylaw would be developed should the bylaw pass, and those regulations will help define what is the application process for a public hearing with the planning board, and provide guidance on how the planning board would evaluate projects that need a public hearing because of the scenic roads. An example, there are development pressures in the community everybody's aware of, and land that historically used to be a very gorgeous farm field with a stone wall along the front are being divided up and built for housing. And what the scenic roads bylaw would allow is, instead of 3 single driveway cuts into that historic stone wall, the planning board could work with that developer to ask, well, have you looked into utilizing the common driveway provision? So you only need to make 1 cut in stone wall for all 3 new single family dwellings. So these are some of the guidance and evaluation criteria. And I want to specifically point out public safety as is a critical criteria. So should there ever be a town project where a stone wall has to be removed or destroyed, which so far none of us have been able to come up with an example, but should that happen, public safety in all measures of what the community does trumps anything and everything. So I want to put that out there, that as far as a town project having to remove a stone wall, for whether it's public safety, dealing with sight lines, or a road reconstruction to take a bend out of the road, or for public safety to redo stormwater because the roadway is flooding. So all of those things can relate back to public safety in what the town does. From now to annual town meeting, what would happen? There are over 100 communities in the Commonwealth that have already adopted the Scenic Roads bylaw. They have bylaws, they have adopted rules and regulations. Some are always better than others, so we will start pulling those together. I also know that town council has also pulled together what they feel are well done documents. And I will work with the senior planner who supports the historical commission to meet with town staff, to talk about those different items within the rules and regs and other stakeholders in the community, and then prepare just a rough draft of rules and regs, just so people have an idea of how those get put together. Should the bylaw pass town meeting, what everybody needs to understand is after town meeting, for a general bylaw or a zoning bylaw, the town clerk has to certify that vote and has a detailed submission that has to be sent to the Attorney General for approval. The Attorney General has 90 days to approve or deny those bylaws, with the option they can send town council a note at the 89th day and say, we need more time and we're giving ourselves 2 more months. So the process can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months. During that time, town staff will work to complete a solid draft of the rules and regulations. And when I say town staff, it's myself, the senior planner, the director of natural resources, all of public works staff, and likely CMLP, since they also do work within those public roads. And then after town staff has had all that input, bring that draft back to the Public Works Commission, the Historical Commission, and the Planning Board for review. Ultimately, when things get to what we determine is a final draft, the Planning Board would be required to have a noticed public hearing on the adoption of those rules and regs. So that's it, and I will turn it over to Melissa Sellfield.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for that really comprehensive overview and for all the help that you have provided the Historical Commission thus far and clearly into the future. I am Melissa Sellfield. I live at 77 Concord Green, and as Elizabeth noted, I'm chair of the Historical Commission. There are dozens of committees and commissions that govern, manage, and shape the life of this town. Each has its own mission and responsibilities. For the Concord Historical Commission, I reference 3. One from our original inception, which was 1973, our administrative code, and from the most recent long-range plan and Vision 2030. They are to identify and safeguard for posterity the unique physical attributes of the town, to conduct research for places of historic value, and to recommend to the town manager methods of protecting and preserving these historic attributes. And finally, to review, as Elizabeth has already noted, the effectiveness of regulatory tools to better protect and preserve the town's character and cultural resources. That's the mission of the Historical Commission. So it's in pursuit of those responsibilities that the commission is putting forth the Scenic Road Bylaw. Like Elizabeth said, we are urging Concordians to join the over 100 Massachusetts towns that have adopted this bylaw. This includes all of our contiguous neighbors with the exception of Maynard. We even ask, why the Scenic Road Bylaw? There's no problem. In other words, it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yet we would like you to think about one of our very historic downtowns, some of our most important historic homes and buildings, commercial buildings downtown. Why did we create an Historic Districts Commission? Why do we have this group of people meet twice a month to review building plans? Couldn't the building inspector do this? Or another example, some of you may be aware that Route 2A, the Battle Road, is nationally listed as a scenic byway. It is also designated as an all-American road. It's an even more prestigious status that requires a road to be, quote, a destination unto itself. As many of you know, this road overlays a fair amount of the original Battle Road, down which the British marched to Concord and back to Boston, launching the American Revolution. Despite these distinctions, the Mass Department of Transportation is proposing major changes for reasons I find very ironic. They are to prepare for the celebration of the 250th anniversary of the beginning of that very revolution. They're going to install splitter islands, crosswalks that connect right now to nothing, blinking lights, and more. Changes that would forever alter this historic road. Such examples show that development pressures and leadership changes in municipal departments can lead to unfortunate consequences with respect to historic resources. Our planning division and public works are led by principled leaders who honor and value Concord's past. Yet they won't always be here. I've spoken to chiefs of several area DPWs, Sudbury, Bedford, Wayland, Linfield, Sherburne, Ashland, Dover, and I've called several more. And I asked all of them about this basic same questions. Is the scenic road bylaw a burden to their department? Do they think it does provide some important protection? The consensus response was that yes, it did add another layer of review, but they all said they would not characterize the additional work as a burden. One department said it probably added another 5 to 6 hearings a year. They also noted, however, that it provided very good control. Another noted that it is very important how you draft the rules and regulations, as Elizabeth had described, that govern the bylaws implementation. The last chief I spoke to said something that really struck me. He said, we want to implement our citizens' vision for their town. To me, this is the heart of the matter. Concord's many committees and commissions were established to shape this town, to implement our vision. We have different responsibilities that sometimes conflict with one another, but working together in a public setting, in this case, it would be the occasional public hearing before the planning board, I believe we can develop a mutually agreed solution. So we are asking really for the support of this bylaw to put in place another regulatory tool to help protect the proposed scenic roads into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melissa and Elizabeth. Very good presentations, a lot of good sharing of information, and you answered a couple of my questions. So that was helpful, that we're able to whittle down. As chair, I'm gonna ask some initial questions. Take the lead first on this one. Because of my day job, I'm familiar with the Scenic Roads program and a lot of the benefits of it. Sometimes the questions that come up deal with the details. So I have a few questions on that. One of them is, in our packet, I don't know if you can see this, we were given an item called frequently asked questions. Is that something that, okay, that you people, whether planning or historic commission have pulled together? So one of my questions is, I'm a bit confused about who this applies to, because on the frequently asked questions, it says personal property would not be affected by the scenic roads bylaw. But then in the bylaw language, it says we as a town will be developing regulations giving guidance to property owners on the application process. So I'm trying to rectify those two statements. Why do property owners need to apply if this doesn't apply to personal property?
So there's the distinction is between what is within a public road right of way and what is private property.
Yeah.
So if somebody needs to, to put in a new, a new driveway, and they are removing trees or, a stone wall, then they would need to, go through the public hearing process. Questions have been raised where many stone walls are defined boundaries.
Yeah.
If a stone wall is, a defined boundary, it is part of, the public way, basically on one side, and it may be private property on the other. So in that case, that scenic roads bylaw would apply if somebody wanted to, let's say, destroy that stone wall. What would be required, and this would be established in the rules and regs, is if a property owner, is putting in a new driveway, they are required to get a driveway approach permit and a road right-of-way permit, and provide a plan for those improvements. That plan, which is a surveyed plan, if it delineated that stone wall on that surveyed plan, and that stone wall is solely within private property, then the scenic roads bylaw would not apply. So that's what that statement in that draft, in the FAQ, which I I always appreciate getting questions, especially when they're about an FAQ, because they can always be improved. So that is definitely something that we'll look
Yep.
to improve in the FAQ before this gets to town meeting.
Okay, so thank you for that explanation. Helps very much. So this applies, and I understand some stone walls may be on a boundary, or a tree may be on a boundary, but this applies to anything within the public right of way. So if there's a stone wall set back 5 feet from the public right of way, and a property owner wants to do something to that stone wall on their property, this scenic bylaw does not.
They can do whatever they want.
So that would, little comment here, that would go back to the planning board to see if there's other ways we can help protect stone walls that are on private property. But I know that's not what we're discussing tonight.
Yes,
so.
that has its own set of challenges.
Yep. What about roads that are in historic districts? Is there one that trumps the other if a project needs to go through approval both as a scenic byway and historic district project?
Good question. I'm not entirely sure about the answer. And one, I will get an answer. So if somebody wants to remove a tree within the public road right of way, that falls under the public shade tree bylaw and the tree warden, and would, if this passes, apply under the scenic roads bylaw only if they are doing the and let me get the paving, reconstruction, maintenance. So it is a really limited focus.
Okay.
There are many properties where if the existing driveway was there and they were doing a project on the property, it was in the historic district, and that property owner, as part of that project, wanted to just get rid of the stone wall, yes, they would be subject to both Historic Districts Commission and a public hearing with the planning board. But only if it's associated with that, repair, maintenance, reconstruction, or paving. So it's a pretty limited focus of the scenic roads bylaw.
Okay. Thank you. I have a request, and I don't know exactly how this could be addressed. And I don't know if the other commission members agree. In the way the bylaw that we were provided, it talks about developing the regulations. Should the article pass, the planning board in coordination with the historic commission will adopt rules and regs. And then in your presentation, you mentioned coordination with DPW also. And I know you'll do that because you said you would do that. Does that need to be in the article, or is this language in the article kind of typical language? It has to be there because the planning board or historic commission are the ones that bring this type of article forward.
That's kind of a two-part question. So one,
yes, it is.
Yes,
or maybe three-part.
I definitely update the FAQ to and have it be planning board, historical commission, public works commission, and stakeholders. So have that be part of the FAQ. The actual warrant article, the actual language of the warrant article is fairly simple. And it's in the explanation below that in the warrant article that may also have to be updated to incorporate the Public Works Commission and stakeholders.
Okay.
Yep.
And then last is not a question. It's just a comment to everybody who's listening to this. The Public Works Department and Commission established some policies back in 1994, which was around the time this issue has come up, as Melissa had in her presentations. This topic has come up numerous times. And back in 94, there were a policy statement that was developed which talked about providing some guidance to Public Works when looking at making improvements to roadways. And I just want to let everybody know, these apply to all roadways in town, not just Scenic. And I just want to make sure the public is aware that we have this policy. And this policy also specifically talks about stone walls, shade trees, and in addition, things such as curves in the topographies, so as not to alter that in any way that's detrimental to the historic context of a particular roadway. So I think we're pretty proud of the fact that we have these that apply to all roadways in town. And in fact, go a bit further because we even talk about things such as don't straighten a roadway if you don't have to. If it's a curvy historic roadway, let's keep that character, but also understanding, and as you said in your presentation, public safety is always number one, but we need to take all these things into consideration when dealing with our roadways. And so
Yeah,
we've got a very good policy in place too. And I'll say that defensively, I just want to let the public know that what you're proposing is pretty much considered on every roadway project, which is fantastic.
Right. The one difference between the policy and the actual adoption of the bylaw, the policy, somebody would come forward and these are the policies, and Public Works staff would say, these are the policies, you should really be doing this. The Scenic Road Bylaw and the public hearing with the planning board puts an extra layer to that. It's not a should, it's a shall. That example I gave previously, if somebody comes forward and wants to put 3 15-foot breaks in the stone wall, the planning board can come back and say, we find that that's a significant disruption, and we want you to come back and look at this option. So I think that's just kind of the one specific major difference. And I agree, Concord has done a good job historically as far as the roadways, but what we're finding, and I think a lot of people see, is the development pressures that the town is experiencing are ones that I don't think, even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that would be happening in some locations. So I think there's a time and a place, and Concord has a very unique way of working together in all of these aspects. So I think it's just another tool.
Yes. Yeah, I should make it clear that this policy is for Public Works and the work that Public Works does, that the commission reviews and comments on every year. So it's within the public way that where we're kind of I wouldn't say policing, monitoring ourselves when it comes to Public Works projects, to make sure we're taking these things into consideration. But you're right, you're dealing with primarily the development, that's the pressure we're getting along these roadways. So we all need to work together. All right, I'm going to be quiet now. Any commission members have comments or questions? David? Yep.
Yes, I want to put Mr. Terry on the spot. Because I read the fine print. First of all, Elizabeth and Melissa, that was a terrific presentation. And I will say, and I think you did great homework. And I'm still on the fence on this. I'm on the fence on this one. I'm on the stone wall. Partly because I'm reading a 1994 Road Management Advisory Committee report that Mr. Terry was on, that decided not to recommend pursuing the Scenic Roads bylaw. And I'm just wondering, Jim, if you can remember, it's only 26 years ago, 27 years ago, if you can remember what your thinking was at the time, why maybe the development pressures have changed, but I keep coming back to what problem are we really solving? What is the cost if we don't do this? What is the risk for the town By the way, I live near 3 of the roads that are on the designation list, so I know those roads pretty well. But I'm trying to get educated more about the pros and cons of this, and I don't want to layer on another level of complexity, into the system that the town is going to have to deal with if the benefits are really totally very small. But that's what I'm trying to understand. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I don't remember. There was, as you see, there are 10 names on the task force that was involved. So we had people from different groups. I think that a couple of the people were on the Public Works Commission at that time. And I was not, obviously. I don't think, at that time I was involved with school reconstruction. So those are the town things that I was doing at the top with the town at that time. I think you are correct that we were probably thinking that if it wasn't broken, if it was working well, we didn't see the need for the scenic roads bylaw at that time.
Thanks.
Well, I would defer to Elizabeth because she speaks better about this than I do, but I think we are extremely concerned about the future. This is a bylaw to protect the future. As I said, I think we've had very enlightened and superb leadership in the planning division and the public works. This is not about what is going on right now, but it is about the future. The development pressures on this town and every town around us are enormous. And we're trying to protect the historic character of Concord. I wasn't going to use this one, but one of the DPW chiefs said, I'm shocked that and it's true. He said, I'm shocked you didn't have it. We assumed you had it all along. I think partly that's a compliment to Concord because it's suggesting that we've had such enlightened management of our roads and our historic properties. But I can see things changing, and this is the responsibility of the Historical Commission to speak out and to encourage people to take responsibility for preserving the character of this town. And we think this is one way. A lot of the roads in Concord have changed and that there's not much we could do it now, but this is a tool that we think is very important. It may be a different philosophy that I have than you might have. We represent different commissions and our mission is different.
Thank you. Andrea, you had a question?
No, I think it was Casey. Unless, Andrea, did you also? I'm sorry. Not yet. Okay. So Jeff, thank you for pointing those things out. And I know that, I've been with the commission for 5 years, and it's certainly always been, preservation has always been, of course, safety preservation. But my feeling is that it's good. Thank you for Elizabeth for coming in and Melissa for your work. It's just good to see an extra layer of protection because, once you lose these things, you just can't get them back. And it just helps to give guidance for public works, as well as put some teeth in it and just a formality of it, just to make sure that things don't fall through the cracks. Our beautiful historic stone walls and trees and roadways. Thank you.
Thank you, Casey. Andrea, yes.
I would actually disagree with that. I think that we have to let public works determine what work needs to be done without an extra layer of bureaucracy to say, we need you to wait a year, or we need to examine this tree better, or just that many more people making a decision to make a repair or to improve a road that would ultimately be for the safe passage of vehicles, bicycles, pedestrians, people walking with kids and dogs. And the thought that a historical commission would then be able to step in and say, no, we want that tree left there, or we want that wall left there because we think it is historical and not a matter of public safety. I just don't agree with that. And I'm glad that public safety is actually a priority, because you listed it as fourth in the list of priorities that you would look at in making a determination as to whether to okay the removal of a tree or a stone wall. So I think that should be first. I think that is first for Public Works anyway, and it should always be first. And I cannot think of a project that the town has done that hasn't very much revered the historical nature of this town. So I can't think of anything it's taken away or destroyed. The destruction of walls is mentioned several times in these documents. I can't think of when that was done by the town. And if it's a issue of wanting to control development by private owners or developers coming in, wouldn't that be a better thing for the zoning board then to decide on, to look at, instead of having Public Works be at the mercy of other town boards or historical commissions to decide whether or not something is better for the town in one way or another? That's just my questions for that.
So a couple of points and answers. So to the point, should this pass, it is not the historical commission, it is the planning board. And the planning board has a very significant role when you're talking about land use development in the community. So your example of Public Works on one of this, if a scenic road, looking at doing a project to accommodate, a new sidewalk or, a bike lane. Those are all things that deal with a much broader conversation in the community. It's the fabric in the Envision Concord plan. So you're not going to see, a planning board sitting there saying that for safety of a mother and her children on a sidewalk because of one tree. You're not going to see a planning board saying that no, we don't want a safe bike lane. And again, we're talking about that constant conversation that happens. And as far as maintenance, that would be one of those exemptions. Anything that's hazardous, dangerous, or the tree warden says that tree is dead, diseased, dying, or is a hazard for sight lines, or that is also can be exempt. And then to your, I think it was your last question, as far as the Zoning Board of Appeals, the state and legislation doesn't allow for the Zoning Board of Appeals to have that type of jurisdiction over a scenic road. So that is why it's the planning board. Did I answer all your questions?
I'm just not sure I understand why we need this extra layer of approval. Like there's a roads policy statement. This was 1999. In the reconstruction of roads, the town of Concord seeks to maintain those aspects of the existing environment which enhance the historic, scenic, and agricultural properties of the roadway consistent with public safety, and in addition to consider alternative transportation accommodations on the town's roads consistent with this policy and public safety. I'm not sure I understand the need for this. I feel like that is done over and over. I think we have historic districts where that is very well respected, and I can't think of another area in town where that hasn't been respected. So I question the need for another layer of approval of bureaucracy to get things done in a timely manner. I mean, we just listened to a 5-year plan to address the needs of the town to have decent roads and drainage and all of that. And I just think this is just a hurdle to get over on some of these roads then when we want to improve them.
No, I can understand, but it's not just Public Works. It is, this isn't just to, for Public Works. There's, a lot of private development pressures. And I think if, the community wants to have a hand in, making sure the historic fabric of these roads is maintained against all of these development pressures, I think the town should, talk the talk and walk the walk. It's, but again, you're
How do
getting
we
back
not
to
do that?
you're getting back to a very narrow, a narrow class of items that would trigger the scenic roads bylaw. So I mean,
Well, I think one of the criticisms that was back in 2006 was that this bylaw approach is very selective and it has a lack of flexibility, which is a one-size-fits-all nature of bylaws. So I actually worry that that bylaw makes it less flexible when it comes to approaching some of these issues.
I'm going to build upon Andrea's question. So it's my understanding that the bylaw would protect trees and stone walls that are in the public right of way. And right now we have a shade tree bylaw. So it may not be apples to apples, but there's some level of protection for shade trees and a need for a public hearing. But right now, if the example you gave, Elizabeth, if somebody has large parcel of, let's say, farmland with a historic wall along the front, and they want to subdivide it and put in 3 new houses, which means they're going to be asking for 3 curb cuts through that historic stone wall. This bylaw would then trigger a hearing, which would then allow the town, the planning board to say, no, you're only getting 1 curb cut. What can we do now? If this isn't there something in place now that we could do that would also prohibit them getting 3 curb cuts? Do you have through site plan approval, through
yeah,
if
no,
they need
so
to come to Public Works for a curb cut, don't we have that control somehow now?
So from a planning perspective, there is no planning trigger currently that allows the town to regulate that unless you're talking about one of the historic districts. Whether Public Works has the ability to deny somebody a driveway permit and tell them, no, we don't want to give you 3, we only want to give you 1. I'll give that back to Alan. I'm not sure if that's.
Alan?
Yeah, I'm going to pass it to Steve, who's been involved with something very similar recently, just to give you the specifics. So, there are tools. They're not perfect. I know that. And I think this is the one area that I see that there'd be a unified need and interest to, collaborate. But
yeah, Alan, that's what I meant when I said, give it some teeth and a real guideline for the Public Works to actually hang their hat on.
yeah, so I think in this particular case, we're talking about an abutter to the right of way who's interested in modifying the right of way, which could change the nature of its character. And that's the question where we do have, Steve, if you want to talk to that issue a little bit. There's some controls, but it's not the teeth that Casey might be talking about.
So first, let me talk about the example that Chairman Foster brought up. If it's a subdivision, now obviously that gets to the planning board, and like every development that goes to the planning board, they get a review from us. So there's back and forth between engineering and planning staff and so on. And if maybe there isn't a specific trigger, but there's an opportunity now, or if a stone wall is impacted, that's when you consolidate the driveways and make them one driveway. I don't think we've had that example recently, at least within my time. But for driveway permits, if someone comes to us today for a driveway permit, they have to present a plan and so on, and we evaluate the plan. Now, if it's a single lot and they want to alter their driveway, right, then we will evaluate the situation. Now, if the stone wall is on their property, then we have no say.
Right.
If the stone wall is on public right of way, then it is a stone wall that belongs to the town. And we can, because it's like any other item within the right of way, we have a say. If it's a tree, if it's a stone wall, if it's a sidewalk, we can put measures in place to mitigate that act.
So I think in the example Elizabeth was giving with the farm, in that case, it wouldn't be, whether this is the case or not, Elizabeth, you could have 3 lots because they're A&R lots, approval not required lots. So it's not a subdivision, it's just property with 1,000 feet of frontage now has 3 parcels with 300 feet of frontage and each one a curb cut. If the stone wall's on our property, it sounds like you're saying we could deny curb cuts, but I wonder legally if
I did not say that.
No,
Yeah, I don't know if
Stephen was saying that we might have the ability to deny the curb cut. But I would just wonder how, if someone could contest that legally because we are restricting access to private property. And as Casey was saying, this then gives us that extra layer of, well, you got to go through a public hearing, and we're a community and we hear what the public has to say and make a decision as a public process, not one property owner talking to DPW.
And it might also apply if somebody wants to do, a horseshoe, to have 2 access,
Yeah.
2 horseshoe, through a stone wall that's on the lot line or just beyond.
Can I kick in one quick
Yeah,
thing?
David, go
I'll
ahead.
try to
Yeah.
be really quick because I'm sensitive to time. I'm a
No
little
problem.
worried about the offense, the cost of the offense. I'm sorry, if I'm a developer, what are you telling me it's going to cost me if I ignore you and put in 3 cuts through a stone wall? How much is that going to cost me?
I thought the same thing, David. Seems
I
very
mean,
low.
$100, $300?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? For what I've just invested in building these houses? That's like change it to spend at Sorrento's for lunch. I mean, I just would want to make sure if we pass this, there should be, some real teeth. If we want this, shouldn't there be some teeth in it that make it, maybe I'm naive, but that make it a serious offense?
Sadly, the town does not have that ability within the state statute. It specifically says that you can make an ordinance or bylaw establishing that a violation of this paragraph shall be punished by a fine not to exceed $300.
Really? Wow.
But in our non-criminal disposition bylaw, it's $300 per day.
Oh, okay.
So
all right.
Yeah, it's not just $300. So
Okay.
per day.
Thank you. I'm done. That's what I need to hear. Thanks.
Thank you. And I know yes, Jim, go right ahead.
I want to ask Elizabeth that question because it says per subsequent offense. It doesn't say per day. So I would like to understand that completely. It's per violation. I don't see in the word that your position makes sense.
Okay, so that's my understanding. So I will go back and I will either verify or and send to Alan and Steve an email on whether my understanding is right or wrong. And I'll get that answer for you.
That's what's in the draft bylaw. Yeah. So Jeff, if you can let me go for a couple more minutes.
Sure. Yeah.
I've driven 6 of these roads in the last couple of days. 4 of them I don't think have stone walls or significant trees in the right of way where there is likely to be future development. Those roads are Barrett's Mill Road, Liberty Street for sure, Strawberry Hill Road, and Westford Road. the roads, the places where I saw stone roads, stone walls are in front of residences. They are not necessarily in vacant fields. So I wonder, the question I'm going to be asking the Historical Commission is, they may be historical roads or scenic roads, but are they roads that make sense for this bylaw? And if I go back to article in the Wall Street, in the Concord Journal a few months ago, Balls Hill Road was the one that was mentioned. And the concern was that the Audubon Society was going to be potentially developing their project, their property that they've been given there, and that would require driveway into their property. And I believe that that's probably the major impetus for the scenic roads bylaw. And I would like information as to the fact that, we're talking about a nonprofit organization that is well known in the state, that if we want to have communication with them, I think we can get what they want to get and what we want to get on Balls Hill taken care of very easily. And I think in most cases, when we have a developer in the town of Concord, they try to work very well with the groups that are regulatory, and they try to, in their mind, balance their economic value and the value that the community has in its scenic roads. So I question, I look forward to hearing further information as to why this is valuable for Concord at this time.
So I'm understanding the commission's time, and I'll only, because sadly, I would disagree with Liberty Street that there's no potential for development, and that's as far as I'll go with that statement. And sadly, I deal with developers that don't have respect for the community values, and those projects don't go well, and they're ones that we're dealing with now. So it's, as Melissa said, we're dealing with how we're going to protect for the future for things that we can't really understand right now, and development pressures are going to continue. So with that, I will.
Yeah, Jeff, one more comment. That
Yep, go right ahead.
The point that David brought up, there is no teeth in this economically. That the fines, as stated in the statute in the state, do not provide a disincentive for the developer to ignore whatever suggestions are made by the planning board.
Okay, thank you, Jim. On our agenda, we had an item for public comment. So unless one of the commission members has anything pressing they want to bring up, I will open it up for public comments. I want to just also make the statement that we try to wrap our meetings up by 6. That doesn't mean we have to wrap it up by 6. So if you have a comment, I would just ask that you make it succinct. But we do appreciate everybody's comments.
Jeff would like to recognize Elise Woodward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fasser. I'm Elise Woodward. I live at 379 Garfield Road. From my perspective, this bylaw is intended as a tool for the Planning Board and the Public Works Commission, similar to the shade tree bylaw, to bring attention to the particular elements of our roadways that contribute to the unique and scenic properties of the town. In that way, it is a prospective bylaw, reinforcing the need for an integrated approach and not a retrospective bylaw being designed to solve a problem. In fact, this bylaw does reinforce the 1994 Public Works Commission roads policy, and specifically the 1999 Commission's road policy statement. And the collaboration of the Historic Commission strengthens this initiative. The benefits of such an integrated approach were articulated in the 2018 Comprehensive Long Range Plan, of which I was a co-chair. Specifically, section 4.7 in Public Facilities and Infrastructure, goal 3, mentioned the rural character of select roads, the goal of preserving and enhancing Concord's scenic, historical, and environmental resources, balanced with improving the health, safety, mobility of the transportation system, as well as recommending more collaboration between Public Works Commission, the Historic Commission, Planning Board, School Committee, Natural Resources Commission, and others to capture opportunities to prioritize projects and improve outcomes. So as town department leadership changes, pressures for development increases, and the town's demographics shift over time, this bylaw will be another reminder of the scenic roads that make Concord unique and create the environment that everyone appreciates and benefits from, as well as a reminder of the attention required to maintain these characteristics. I encourage the commission to support this bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak?
Yes, I'd like to recognize Carlin Reed.
Thank you, Jeff. Carlin Reed, 83 Wits End. I have been looking at this interactive website that's actually rather well done. It shows all the properties that are being impacted, that would be impacted by this bylaw, by the property boundaries, and that's useful. What I don't see on this website is whether or not the planning board has voted to support this proposed bylaw. Has that vote taken place?
The planning board has not taken a formal vote. The historical commission has come to the planning board to, and present this idea, and they were support of moving forward with the drafting of the warrant article. So the warrant article, the final draft was just reviewed by town council, very recently. So this will come back to the planning board, I think at their either their January 25th or one of their meetings in February to take a formal vote.
Thank you.
Looks like Joanne, I see her raising her hand.
Joanne Gibson, 88 Walden Street, Concord. I'm in Florida right now, so I had to put that in. But anyway, when I read the Concord Public Works mission statement, I was struck by the words "enhance the quality of the life consistent with community values." And I think by supporting the Scenic Roads bylaw, you would be, that's an excellent way to put into words, that put action into these words. The way in which a community expresses its values is through its plans, its long-range plans, and its various other plans, and also at town meeting votes. And the plans have indicated, as Elizabeth outlined, that the town of Concord is interested in having more teeth in the ability to preserve our historic landscapes, including our roads. There's numerous years what happened. And an example where the CPW has been very in tune with community values is the public shade tree hearings and bylaw, because that's where citizens of the CPW work together. And I see the Scenic Roads bylaw as being able to work with your public shade tree hearings on the roads which are designated. I've served on many town committees. I won't enumerate them all. Excuse me, I've got a pop up on the middle of my screen here, and I've got to see if I can get it down. There we go. And one of the things that always struck me is how the people who work for the town, the staff and the citizens, work together so well. We're all on the same team. And this is an opportunity to be on the same team. And I can't for the life of me understand why it isn't going to be onerous. It would be listening to community values. And I just feel that, by the way, it said at the 2023 town meeting, it's for the 2022 town meeting, Elizabeth, on the thing, it said the 2023 town meeting, but this will be this spring. And I just.
On what thing?
On your first, what you put up on the screen, all said.
Oh, the slide, okay.
Slide, all said that, but so we're not talking, I couldn't go through this for another, I've been going through this for so many years that, and I'm also wondering, is the 1994 roads policy ever been officially adopted, voted on? Certainly not at town meeting, but I understood it was that it was never actually voted on. But all I know is I'm really calling on you to be part of a team of citizens and commissions, and we've got a gem in Concord, and we've got to preserve it. And I think if it takes somebody a few more minutes or a few more hoops to jump through occasionally, it's worth it. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I haven't forgotten your question, but I want to see if anybody else from the public would like to offer a comment also. Do you see anyone, Anna?
Oh, I
Alan?
do. Let me
Okay.
see.
So Alan, a couple questions for you.
Oh, no,
One
it's a thumbs up. Sorry, there was confusion.
oh, no, Nancy. I see Nancy waving her hand.
I think that was a thumbs up. Nancy, do
Hi.
you wish to be recognized?
Oh,
Can't hear you, Nancy.
The classic problem.
There you go.
I just want to reaffirm some of the things that Elise said, and Joanne, I look at this mainly as an opportunity to combine the expertise of people with historical background and experience. I hope all of you had a chance to read some of the research that's gone into documenting these roads. And to put that together with Public Works, when I'm in a meeting, I always almost immediately turn myself in as a landscape architect to highway engineers and road guys, because we classically have very different points of view about how to handle elements in the landscape. And I see this as not an onerous thing. There's no real teeth, as has been pointed out. It's not going to damage anybody's project or property rights, but it allows people to exchange more information about what are the important elements of safety, what are the important characteristics of a historic road, how does that contribute to the historic character, and it just expands and strengthens the dialogue among citizens of Concord, who all want the same things, I think, but maybe road engineers and so on and so forth, you guys don't have the depth of historical knowledge that might inform your decisions. That might be very helpful. So that's all.
Thank you for your comment. Now I'll ask again, anybody else?
Yes, I see someone by the name of.
hi, this is
Lily.
oh. Yes, Nancy Frisella Lee, 140 Walden Street. I just want to make a quick comment that has really already been said. For me, this is about education. So this is a very fast moving world, and people who live in Concord don't, there are a group of people who appreciate Concord's history. Many of us are passionate about Concord's history and know a lot about it. Other people who move here don't know so much about it. And in one of I've been reading a lot in the past planning, all the 2018 planning and others, and going backwards too in researching. I was one of the researchers on the roads. And one thing that always strikes me is that even 20, 30 years ago, people kept reiterating, we need to be careful and preserve our history. We need to preserve our resources. It's always something that, a point that's highlighted and something that, we should point out that we should always work towards. And to me, this is just another tool, that word that other people have used, to put in all of our pockets. We don't want to cause any one commission more work. And since so many other towns around us have this, there's, almost every town around us has this scenic bylaws. And, and I think a lot of us, some people, I haven't, but other people have reached out and asked them what kinds of burdens it places. And we haven't had a feedback that it's been burdensome. And in fact, maybe it's only very rarely used, but when it is, it's really appreciated that as a tool, it's there. For example, if one person buys a house on Monument Street, on a place on Monument Street that's not in a historic district, not all of our town is, incorporated into a historic district, although there are many other historic properties dotted around that also need protected and are worth protecting. So some owners might buy that and might think, gee, I want to put in a horseshoe driveway that I didn't have. And they might start going ahead and doing that. And they might not appreciate themselves, the importance of a stone wall, and a small portion of it, when you start eroding little parts of it, how, in the conglomerate after time, that adds to the kind of lessening of the rural character of our town. And there's just so much development. I've seen it. I've only lived here for, I don't know, 15, 20 years. And I've already seen so much change. And in researching some of these roads, I've seen pictures of historic houses that had stone walls in front of them, and now no longer do. So I just want to reiterate, for me, this is about education, about drawing attention to our scenic roads, about having our committees working together, and about having the people who change. We're just here now, but in the future, personnel will change. You guys will change. The Historic Commission people will change. And this way, it's in place for everybody to remember that this is what we wanted to emphasize in this time. And we are all committed to together protecting the character of our town. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. So Alan, a couple questions for you as I've been teeing them up. One is, do you know if and you may have to research this, the policy that was developed back in '94, who was that accepted by or endorsed by?
Yeah, I will confirm, whenever we talk policy, it has historically meant the commission has reviewed and voted on it. So we will research that, but it's not just 94, it was 99 where it was modified to incorporate, some, expansion. So I'll research that, but when we say a policy, it means historically it's been vetted and voted.
And then another question I had is, and maybe it's my bad, I understand that the Historic Commission is asking for us to endorse the proposed bylaw. That was not my understanding that we're being asked that today. I thought it was more of a discussion and an education process.
Yeah, this is intended to be informative for the commission. It's the first time you're getting the opportunity to discuss it. I think the ask is eventually, could you endorse? And it's draft, and I imagine there's going to be some tweaks before it's final, and then we'll be able to see what it actually states.
Okay. I don't know if any other commission members are, I'll get to you in a minute, Dennis, if any other commission members are prepared to vote. If so, I'll entertain a motion, but I personally need a little more time to think about this, and we can discuss it at future meetings. I'm seeing some head nods. Yes, Dennis, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I sit on the Historic Districts Commission, and I want to give a concrete example where these commissions and the town work together, Public Works, in order to create a better situation. Thankfully, the intersection of Concord, of Cambridge Turnpike and Lexington Road was under the jurisdiction of the Historic Districts Commission. The original plan for the new intersection, frankly, was fairly insensitive to the surroundings. And so it came before Historic Districts. We worked on this for many months to get the situation that we have there now. It was going to be over landscape. There was going to be items there that just weren't sensitive. We asked that they recreate part of the road, and if you notice, there's a broad sweep of dirt there, which reproduces the original Cambridge Turnpike, because what you were taking away was part of the original road that had been there for decades, if not centuries. So this is a concrete example where, thankfully, in this case, Historic Districts was there in order to work with Public Works to come up with an excellent solution to that particular intersection. And if it had not been there, I think what you would have had is something that I don't think was very sensitive to that particularly intersection where the museum is on one side and Emerson House, particularly Emerson House, is on the other.
Thank you. Appreciate everyone's comments. Seeing we're almost 6 o'clock and we have some other discussion items here. If the commission members agree, I'm going to call this item to close for now. I think we'll be addressing it at future commission meetings. So just so the public knows, we may be discussing this at another meeting. So please, if you want to listen in or participate in the conversation, look at our future agendas.
Thank
And
you.
with that, I'll ask Alan to move along to the next item. And we all know you and the staff do great work, Alan. So, and you give us a great overview on our packet. So if you want to streamline the update, I think that'll be fine with all of us.
That would be great. And I will, let's see, we're on to the director's update. I'm going to share the screen and bring up the slides to kind of help us. Oh, you would have appreciated, Jeff. I almost hit the leave button, not the share. We're still here. Did the director's report image come up?
With some lovely Christmas trees, yes.
All right, okay. So with that said, we'll start off with Melissa Simoncini. And I'm asking staff, I'm going to call you. Thanks for listening in, but just keep it brief and, understand the commission's read the report. So just a very quick hello and update. Melissa, are you there?
I'm here. Thanks, Alan. Melissa Simoncini, Environmental Services Program Administrator. You saw Erin's lovely picture of Christmas tree collection this weekend. Also, just a quick heads up, we are doing styrofoam block recycling. Purchase your bag online, pick it up here at Public Works and bring it down pre-filled up to the compost site, and they will pack it away in the trailer for recycling. If you're planning on doing it, just a quick heads up, we only have room for 50 more bags. So if you're thinking about doing it, sign up for your bag and come down and grab it. We are also collecting holiday lights at that same container for no charge. Next slide. And just a quick reminder about your trash and recycling during our lovely snow season. When the guys came out last Saturday, they weren't able to collect a number of barrels and bins because they were buried underneath snow. So just trying to be sensitive and balancing where you're putting your trash with your personal and town snow management, that would be helpful. And with that said, if you are along a street that the sidewalk plow comes down, also try to be sensitive about making sure that those bins and barrels are either in your driveway or away from that way, so the guys can effectively clear the sidewalk. And for all the extra people, just a quick reminder, if we do have to cancel trash and recycling for a weather event, it will be rescheduled. That one day will be rescheduled for Saturday collection, and we'll get a news and notice out via email and also do a code red to the area affected.
Thank you,
That's all I
Melissa.
have for the group.
Great. We'll go to Steve Dukran on engineering. Steve?
Yes, thank you. This is some work that we recently completed on Hubbard Street. Got some drainage in to improve the conditions on the street. The project is closed for the winter. I understand this water sewer division is doing some sewer lining. That will be done throughout the winter, but we'll resume the road work in the spring. This photo shows some work that was done on Monument Street. After we completed the culvert project, National Grid came back to reconnect their pipeline, but they took the opportunity of upgrading their pipe for about 100 feet or so. This is the finished work. They did a patch, and we'll be back there next spring or next year to resurface the entire area. We're showing this photograph because we worked with the school department to come up with projects for safe routes to school. We put in an application. This one is to get a sidewalk from Cambridge Turnpike on the, I guess this will be the south side of Lexington Road, to get over to Haywood Street and getting over to Alcott. There's a beautiful stone wall, as you can see. Our intention is not to touch the stone wall because these we recognize are very important to the town. And although we not be versed with it in the deep history, it is very, it is our goal to continue to preserve stone walls and trees as we do projects. This doesn't mean that there's a project here. We're waiting on the grants to be evaluated and to know whether the town was selected or not.
In fact, Steve, I'll just mention to the commission, we worked with the NRC to allow them to extend this wall into the right-of-way to sort of improve that corner. You may recall that was done, within the year or so. So that's working with the NRC to add stone wall into the right-of-way. We'll now bring on Aaron McCloskey. Aaron, if you're available to talk about some of the winter maintenance activities and whatnot.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Aaron McCloskey, Highway and Ground Superintendent. The first photo we have here is an equipment operator loading salt into the salt shed. We had our first major plowing operation last week on Friday. Started about, crews came in 2 a.m. Last crew left about 11:30 p.m. on Friday evening. We had about an 8-inch snowfall. Total labor hours for the storm are 565 labor hours. That includes town staff and contractors. Used about 370 tons of salt. The total storm cost was just over $57,000. So after every storm, we refill the salt shed. Loads coming in every day. This is one of our sidewalk machines. It's a Bombardier Prinoff SW4S. This is just an example of some of the issues that come up during storm operation. You can see the track was damaged and ripped. And the machine had to be towed back to the shop. This was actually earlier in the season. This wasn't on Friday, but that machine's since been repaired, new track installed, and back into service. Last month we did grinding of brush. This is down at the 755 Walden Street compost site. We collect brush throughout the year. Residents are able to bring brush down on Wednesday evenings or Saturdays, and also we accumulate brush for CPW tree maintenance operations, and annually we just surplus that. She's a surplus designation. We grind the brush. You can see a large excavator loading into a large grinding machine. We grind up the brush and also logs and materials hauled off site so that we can open up the area for our, we also use this as a multi-purpose facility. We use this as a snow dump in the wintertime. I believe the next photos are the same. So this is just another photo. You can see the large piles of the chippings and the grindings resulting from the brush operation, and all this is hauled off site. This is the crew installing sod down at Emerson Park. This is part of the restoration efforts after we did some grading and leveling out of the ball fields in the park. Originally planned to do some seeding, but obviously with the timing and the season, we had to install sod so that we could open up the park to use by the public. So this is the crew here kind of rolling it out. You can see the tractor top of the photo. We have an attachment that allows us to roll large rolls of sod out, and crew members installing it. This is an example. This is actually next to Ripley baseball field. This is a large pine tree that was damaged during a storm event, created a hazard situation. Crews had to come in and remove that tree. So you can see here, we have one of our parketry specialists, Ariel, in the bucket there, operating a chainsaw, cutting down the tree. Another equipment operator in the front end loader with a boom on it, securing the tree while we remove that pine.
Okay, Aaron, we're going to pass it off to Jeff Morosky, who's the Water Sewer Superintendent. Jeff, are you available?
I am, Alan.
All right.
Good evening, commission members and members of the public. Jeff Morosky, Water and Sewer Superintendent. This image we're looking at here, we actually talked about a little bit at our December 8th commission meeting. It was that very day we were experiencing a collapse of a cured in place pipe sewer. That's a trenchless form of rehabilitation. The reason this was urgent and we needed to do an emergency repair is it was preventing us from reinstating the sewer service from number 94 Hubbard Street. So we ended up mobilizing a contractor to assist the town, and we ended up getting that restored prior to midnight, and then closing out the site and leaving the site by midnight. Towards the back end of the reporting period, we had more incidences. What we're looking at here on the screen is a water main break. It's actually what you would characterize as a blowout. If you see the inset on the right, is kind of a fish mouth shaped to that crack. That's a particular type of blowout. It's a partial blowout. It did not allow a large flow as you could possibly get from a 12-inch water main. This was a 12-inch cast iron water main installed in the 60s. This occurred on December 26th. We had an alert to it early in the morning hours that Sunday, and we ended up having this repaired with crew forces, water and sewer crew, and also the support of highway and grounds. And we had this repaired by just after midday on Sunday that day. And then a week later, we actually had a flurry of incidents on Sunday, January 2nd, where we had a water service saddle on Comerford on an AC water main fail. Shortly after that, we had a sewer backup on a 6-inch VC sewer on Stowe Street. That was problematic because our jetter vector has been out of service and being worked on. So we actually needed to call on help from a neighboring community. That was Bedford. Bedford came to our assistance with a vector and a crew to help us clear out that sewer main. And then that same day, the 2nd, we also had a power outage in western side of town that knocked out our Assabet sewer pump station, which is of course one of our 2 large pump stations. And the upgrades that we had done had had a standby generator on site, and that standby generator did kick on, do its job, and it did deactivate when the power was restored. So that was very pleasing that it operated the way that it was supposed to operate.
Okay, Jeff, thank you. I think I'm just going to wrap that up with the fact that it's kind of interesting during the holiday seasons, a couple long weekends, people are enjoying. This is just sort of to state the obvious, but not everybody thinks about it. Christmas Day, we had operations crew out sort of trying to keep the roads open and safe. It was very slick, a lot of accidents around Concord, but not so much in Concord. But crews were working through Christmas. The water main break occurred the day after. All through the week, there's been sort of mixed precipitation. People think about our winter maintenance as snow, but really it's the change in conditions that are really challenging. So we've had operators rolling routinely throughout the night to try and keep the road safe. And as Jeff mentioned, the next long weekend, New Year's weekend, we had multiple crews in responding to emergencies. So it's just sort of a hats off to the operations people. They're dedicated, they're committed. We're juggling resources with COVID challenges that are affecting everybody. So it's really remarkable with the crews and operators that we have and are ready and willing to serve when called upon. So just kind of kudos to that group. So with that said, that's the end of the director's report. And I'll turn it over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Alan. And yeah, kudos to the team for the triple whammy on New Year's weekend, getting us through that. We're now on to the agenda with commissioners' comments. So would any of the commissioners like to add anything? Jim, I see your hand pop right up.
Yes, it's with regard to the director's report, if you will.
Yes.
On the second page, Commonwealth Avenue, I know it's going to be rebuilt next year. When it gets warm, it would be really nice to have some potholes filled between the train tracks and Lawsbrook. It's just terrible along that stretch. And the other thing is, I would like to have the commission send a letter of thanks to the Bedford Public Works for bringing their work over for the Stowe Street problem when we didn't have things. So if staff could draft a short letter for Jeff's signature, that I think that'd be perfect.
Mhm. Yes, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, David, looks like you are ready to go. David? Oh, thumbs up, sorry. Anybody else like to say anything? Any commission members? Any other comments?
Just a great idea.
Okay. Not seeing any. How about from the general public? Anybody else who's hanging in there who would like to offer any comments on a new subject we haven't covered already?
If I don't see anyone.
Okay. Well, thank you all for hanging in with us. Oh,
I
Jim,
move we
yes.
adjourn.
What?
I move we adjourn.
Oh, that was quick. I was gonna say, do we have a motion to adjourn? Do I hear a second?
I second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing
I'll
none,
second.
I'm not gonna, I'm gonna give a chance for it.
Okay.
We will vote on the motion to adjourn the meeting. David DeLong? I think I saw you, I read your
Aye.
lips. You said yes. Andrea Solomon,
Aye.
James Terry,
Aye.
Casey Winslow,
Aye.
Jeff Vassar, aye. Thank you all for your attendance and have a great evening.
Yeah.